Hello everyone and welcome to the next instalment in this van build series. I start this video where we left off in the last one with the wall cladding. I still had a bit of filling and sanding to do. I've filled up all the screw holes with a little bit of wood filler, and as you can see here I'm just sanding it all back to make it nice and smooth, ready to paint. As always with sanding filler, it gets very dusty, so I used a vacuum cleaner to suck out all of the dust from the grooves and a damp cloth just to wipe over the panelling before I painted it. All the screw holes have been filled up, sanded back, and it's had a couple of coats of paint. With the wall cladding now complete, I can move on to making some overhead storage cupboards. I'm going to have one up here in between this space. I've installed a socket and that's going to be inside the cupboard for charging toothbrushes and things like that. I want one above the kitchen area up here, and that's going to house a control panel up this end for all of the circuits throughout the van, so you can switch them on and off from there. And then I'm going to have another one at the back here for storing clothes, and this socket is for the TV, and that'll be just below the storage cupboard. The construction method for the overhead cupboards is going to be very similar to this unit here. I've made it out of these 25mm roofing battens for the initial framework, and then the front piece is framed off using these pine planks which I got from an old futon. So the first part for making an overhead cupboard is to make a framework, and I'm just going to be using some 25mm roofing batten. So that's the first overhead cupboard made. I've spaced it from the ceiling a little bit. As you can see, both these frameworks were exactly the same size. I've just staggered them slightly. So that brings the cupboard down and leaves this gap at the top here. And it also gives us something to fix the ply to for the base of the unit. And I'll put a batten across the back there a bit later on. Using the same method for joining this framework together using pocket hole screws, I make another two overhead cupboards, one for above the bed area and one for above the kitchen. However, these ones are slightly different. And this is a final overhead cupboard to go above the kitchen area. I've made it exactly the same size as the one above the bed, except this one's going to have a little shelf at each end here and up there, whereas the one above the bed's only going to have it at one end. just for a bit of extra storage, for putting spices in maybe, or one of those hanging plants to make it look pretty, you know. And now I can make 4 doors exactly the same size for both the units. Now I'm just using a piece of sandpaper to put a bevel on the edges. It just gives it a cleaner finish. These are all my doors for the overhead cupboards. I'm now going to router a groove in the back of it just to take a ply panel. For the last cupboard doors, I chiselled out the corners and cut the ply by hand, but for these ones, to save time, I'm just going to laser cut some panels to go in here. So I've measured it and I've made the file and I'm just going to cut it. So it's simply a case of clicking start. Okay, these frames are exactly the same size, outside dimension, so I'm now going to offset them. Right, I'm now just going to screw the inner frame to the outer frame from the back. So I've got a big pile of frames here and I need to go over them and just make sure that I've filled up all the holes. I'm now going to sand all the filler off and get it ready for painting. Alright, let's get some chalk paint on here. It does cover very well. It's thick paint, this chalk paint, so it only really needs 1 coat. And one of you guys suggested to me that I get some Rust-Oleum chalk paint sealer. As chalk paint, it's not very durable unless it's coated in a wax or a lacquer of some kind, because I like the finish of chalk paint, but it's not very durable without a sealer. Because this chalk paint marks so easy, I've put a towel down and I'm wearing some gloves just to stop any greases on my fingers from going on the chalk paint. Finally, I've got some lacquer that's just turned up, Rust-Oleum Crystal Clear, and this is used to protect the chalk paint finish. At the moment, if you scratch the chalk paint, it's really easy to mark, so by putting this on, hopefully it will put a hard finish on it and just stop us marking the chalk paint. can to do all the framework and the doors. I've got another can to do the kitchen, and it just gives it this nice protective coating. It changes the colour ever so slightly, it's slightly darker now, but I actually quite like it, so yeah, that's good. I'm going to actually paint the backs of the doors with just another lacquer I've got. It's a cheaper one, that floor varnish.